Have you ever noticed that the people you fall the hardest for always show up when you feel the most lost? When your soul is fragile, when you crave love but fear it, when you're questioning everything about who you are and what you want from life. And somehow they feel like fate. But what if what you call fated love is actually your shadow begging to be seen? So, what if this person didn't come to stay, but to show you what still hurts? What if they're not your destiny, but your psychology dressed up as romance? We romanticize intensity, don't we? The tears, the chaos, the deep pull towards someone who sees through us. We've been taught that love should feel overwhelming, consuming, like a storm that changes the landscape of your heart forever. But here's what no one talks about. Many of these connections begin with emptiness, not wholeness. Think about it. You meet them during heartbreak, burnout, identity loss. When you're questioning everything about who you are and what you want. When you feel like you're floating in space without gravity. And then they appear, and we tell ourselves, this is fate. But Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who gave us the concept of the collective unconscious, taught us something profound. The unconscious chooses who we love until we choose differently. Jung spent decades studying the human psyche, and he discovered that we're drawn to people who reflect our unhealed wounds, our unlived potential, our rejected parts. He called this projection, and it's one of the most powerful forces in human attraction. This video is not here to define love for you. It's not here to tell you whether your relationship is real or not. It's here to ask the real question. Did they come from love or from a wound disguised as love? Pause here for a moment. Take a breath. If this question already feels uncomfortable, that's exactly where we need to go. Let me tell you about Maya. Maya was 28, burned out from a corporate job that drained her soul. She'd spent years climbing ladders that led nowhere, achieving things that felt hollow. She was successful on paper, empty on the inside. That's when she met David. David was complicated, emotionally unavailable, but intensely present when he chose to be. He was an artist, passionate, wounded, carrying his own shadows. And when Maya looked at him, she felt seen in a way she'd never experienced. You meet them at your lowest, when you weren't anchored in yourself, and still, they feel like home. But here's what Maya didn't realize at the time. That familiarity wasn't her soul recognizing someone. It was her nervous system reacting to danger as desire. Jung called this falling in love with our own projection. We see in others what we've rejected in ourselves. Maya, who had spent years suppressing her creativity to be successful, was magnetically drawn to David's artistic passion. David, who feared commitment, was drawn to Maya's stability and devotion. You felt seen because they mirrored what you've been craving your whole life. Validation, safety, belonging. But what if that mirror was cracked? What if you projected your inner child onto them and mistook that pain for passion? Think about your most intense romantic connection, the one that still makes your chest tight when you remember it. Now ask yourself, what was missing in your life when you met them? What were you seeking? What wound were you trying to heal? Because here's the thing about projection. It's not conscious. Your unconscious mind scans the environment for someone who can give you what you've always needed. And when it finds that person, it creates a feeling so powerful, so magnetic, that it feels like destiny. But Jung warned us, we are attracted to what we are missing. And what we are missing is usually what we've rejected in ourselves. Maya threw herself into loving David with the intensity of someone drowning. She made his struggles her struggles. His pain became her mission. His healing became her purpose. And for a while, it felt like the most meaningful thing she'd ever done. This is what Jung called anima and animus projection. We project our inner masculine or feminine onto our partners, asking them to carry parts of ourselves that we haven't integrated. It creates intense attraction, but it's not sustainable love, it's unconscious psychology. Before we continue, grab a pen. Write down the name of someone you fell hard for. Under their name, write 3 qualities that drew you to them. Now ask yourself, what parts of me are reflected in those qualities? The moment of truth came from Maya on a Tuesday in October. David had been pulling away for weeks. The conversations that used to last hours became clipped exchanges about logistics. The spontaneous adventure stopped. The passionate discussions about art and meaning faded into polite small talk. Maya could feel him slipping through her fingers like water, and the more she tried to hold on, the faster he disappeared. She started analyzing every interaction, replaying conversations, searching for clues about what she'd done wrong. She suggested date ideas that felt more and more desperate. She bought him art supplies and books, trying to show her support for his creativity. She asked careful questions about his mood, his work, his plans. Nothing worked. And then he said it. "I need space to figure things out." 6 words that shattered Maya's world. Maya didn't just miss him, she unraveled. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work. She found herself driving past places they'd been together, looking for his car. She checked his social media obsessively, analyzing every post for hidden meanings. She wrote and deleted hundreds of texts. Her friends told her it was normal heartbreak. Time would heal it. She'd find someone better. But this didn't feel like heartbreak. This felt like death. That's how you know it wasn't just connection. It was collapse. Because if the love was faded, you wouldn't feel erased. You'd feel returned to yourself. Here's what Jung understood that most of us don't. Real love doesn't complete you. It reveals you. When Maya lost David, she didn't just lose a person. She lost her sense of purpose, her identity, her reason for getting up in the morning. She lost a version of herself that felt creative, passionate, alive. Without him, she went back to feeling like the empty corporate drone she'd been before they met. And that told her everything she needed to know about what this connection really was. It wasn't love. It was dependency disguised as destiny. If this part hits something in you, keep going. The next few minutes might feel like a mirror. They might show you things about your own patterns that you've been avoiding seeing. Let me tell you what real fate feels like, because the difference is profound. Fated love doesn't demand performance. It invites presence. Let me explain what I mean. When you're with someone who truly sees you, you don't feel like you need to be more interesting, more attractive, more healed, more anything. You feel permission to be exactly who you are in this moment, including your shadows, your fears, your unfinished edges. Real love creates what Jung called a temenos, a sacred space where you can be vulnerable without being judged, where you can grow without being rushed, where you can be human without being perfect. But trauma bonding? Trauma bonding makes you feel like you're auditioning for a role in someone else's life. You know the feeling, that anxiety in your chest when they don't text back quickly enough. That constant scanning for signs that they're pulling away. That exhausting internal dialogue. What did I do wrong? How can I fix this? What do they need from me? That hypervigilance. That walking on eggshells. That feeling like you're constantly trying to solve a puzzle you don't understand. That's not love. That's your nervous system recognizing an old pattern and trying to solve it. When Maya was with David, she was constantly performing. Not intentionally, but unconsciously. She was always trying to be the cool girlfriend who didn't need too much, the supportive partner who understood his creative process, the low-maintenance woman who could handle his emotional unavailability. She had learned early in life that love was conditional, that she had to earn it by being good enough, successful enough, undemanding enough. So when David showed up with his own commitment issues, her unconscious said, "Oh, I know this dance. I know how to win this game." But love isn't a game to be won. It's a space to be shared. Real fate doesn't make you disappear. It asks you to finally show up. Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are, separate from the expectations and projections of others. And he believed that real love could only happen between two individuated people. Individuation means knowing who you are when no one else is around. It means having a relationship with yourself that's so solid that other people can add to your life without being able to destroy it. When Maya's relationship with David ended, she spent months in therapy, slowly untangling her patterns. She worked with a Jungian analyst who helped her understand that what she thought was love was actually her trying to heal her relationship with her father through David. Maya's father had been a workaholic, brilliant, successful, but emotionally distant. He loved Maya, but he showed it through achievements rather than presence. He praised her report cards, but missed her school plays. He paid for her college, but never asked about her dreams. Maya learned that to get her father's attention, she had to accomplish something worth noticing. Love came through performance. Affection was earned through success. Sound familiar? David, with his artistic passion and emotional unavailability, was a perfect match for Maya's father complex. Like her father, David was brilliant but distant. Like her father, David's love felt conditional, dependent on Maya not being too needy, too demanding, too much. This is what Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Maya had been unconsciously seeking her father in every man she dated, trying to get from them what she never received as a child. And because this need was so deep, so primal, when she found someone who matched that pattern, it felt like coming home. But it wasn't home. It was a haunted house. Jung discovered that we all carry complexes, clusters of emotionally charged thoughts and images that operate independently in our psyche. A father complex might make you unconsciously seek partners who are emotionally unavailable, because that's what feels familiar. A mother complex might make you seek partners who are nurturing but controlling. These complexes are formed in childhood and operate below the level of consciousness. They're not bad or wrong. They're just psychological patterns that helped us survive our early environment. But in adulthood, they can trap us in repetitive relationship dynamics. The father complex convinces you that if you can just love this emotionally unavailable person well enough, if you can just be perfect enough, understanding enough, undemanding enough, you'll finally get the love you always needed. But here's the thing. You can't heal childhood wounds through adult relationships. You can only heal them through conscious inner work. The difference between trauma bonding and soul bonding is this. Trauma bonding feels like urgency. Soul bonding feels like peace. Trauma bonding makes you chase. Soul bonding makes you rest. Trauma bonding asks, "What can I do to keep this?" Soul bonding asks, "How can I love more deeply?" Trauma bonding is about proving you're worthy of love. Soul bonding is about sharing the love you already know you deserve. You'd recognize real fate not by how fast your heart beats, but by how deeply your nervous system relaxes in their presence. Think about the last time you felt truly at peace with someone. Not excited, not anxious, not performing, just peaceful. What did that feel like in your body? Can you remember the quality of that stillness? So how do you know if it's fate or projection? Let me share another story. This one about James. James was 32 when he met Sarah. But his story really begins 2 years earlier when his 5-year relationship with Emma ended. Emma had been James's first serious adult relationship. They'd met in college and stayed together through his early 20s, building a life that looked stable and mature from the outside. But underneath, James felt like he was suffocating. Emma was wonderful, kind, intelligent, reliable. But James realized he'd chosen her because she felt safe, not because he was authentically attracted to her. He'd been so afraid of ending up alone that he'd settled for a relationship that was comfortable rather than fulfilling. When Emma finally ended things, saying she could feel his emotional distance even when he was physically present, James was devastated. Not because he'd lost his soulmate, but because he realized he'd wasted 5 years of both their lives being emotionally unavailable. That breakup forced James into the deepest period of self-reflection he'd ever experienced. He went to therapy. He read Jung's collected works. He took long solo trips where he had nothing to do but sit with his own thoughts. He learned to be alone without being lonely. For 2 years, James didn't date seriously. He had casual connections, but nothing that triggered his old patterns of either running away or settling for safety. He was learning who he was outside of relationships. James discovered things about himself he'd never known. He loved cooking elaborate meals for one. He was actually quite social when he wasn't trying to maintain a relationship persona. He had strong opinions about art and politics that he'd never expressed because he was too busy trying to be agreeable. Most importantly, James learned to enjoy his own company. He developed what Jung called a relationship with the self, a deep, loving connection with his own inner world. James met Sarah at a pottery class on a random Thursday morning. He'd been single for 2 years, doing the work, going to therapy, learning to be alone without being lonely. He wasn't looking for anyone. In fact, he was quite content with his life as it was. When James met Sarah, something was different. There was attraction, yes, but not the desperate, consuming kind he was used to. It felt easy, natural, like two rivers flowing into each other without force. Sarah was a high school teacher who taught art to teenagers. She was grounded in a way that felt both solid and fluid. She had her own interests, her own friends, her own relationship with solitude. She wasn't looking to be completed by someone else because she'd already done the work of becoming whole herself. The first thing James noticed about Sarah wasn't her beauty or her charm. It was her presence. She had this quality of being fully where she was, fully engaged with whatever she was doing. When she worked with clay, she was completely absorbed. When she listened, she really listened. When she laughed, it came from somewhere deep and genuine. Sarah didn't fix James's loneliness because he wasn't lonely anymore. She didn't complete his identity because he already knew who he was. She didn't trigger his wounds because she wasn't carrying the same unconscious patterns his mother had. Instead, she witnessed him. She celebrated his growth. She supported his dreams without needing to control them. And when they disagreed, it felt like two separate people working through something together. Not one person trying to merge with another. This is what Jung called a conscious relationship. Love between two people who have done enough inner work to see each other clearly, without the fog of projection. But how do you tell the difference when you're in it? Ask yourself these questions. Was I whole when they entered my life? Not perfect, not healed completely, but grounded. Did you know who you were outside of relationships? Did you have a sense of purpose, interests, friends who truly saw you? Or were you floating, seeking, desperately hoping someone would give your life meaning? James was whole when he met Sarah. He had a life he enjoyed, work that fulfilled him, friendships that nourished him. Sarah added to his life. She didn't become his life. Maya, on the other hand, was empty when she met David. She was successful but purposeless, accomplished but unfulfilled. David didn't add to her life. He became her life. Do I become more me with them? Or do I become who I think I need to be? This is crucial. Real love makes you more yourself, not less. It gives you permission to be weird, vulnerable, creative, quiet, whatever you authentically are. With Sarah, James felt more like himself than he'd ever felt in a relationship. His quirks were endearing rather than embarrassing. His introversion was respected rather than seen as a problem to solve. His ambitions were supported rather than threatened. With David, Maya constantly edited herself. She became interested in photography because David was. She started going to coffee shops she didn't really like because that's where he hung out. She suppressed her need for stability and predictability because she thought it made her boring. If you find yourself constantly editing yourself, walking on eggshells, or performing a version of yourself you think they'll like better, that's not love. That's adaptation. When they walk away, do I feel grief or do I feel destroyed? Grief is clean. It hurts, but it doesn't destroy your sense of self. You miss the person, but you don't miss yourself. You're sad about the loss, but you're not confused about who you are without them. Destruction is different. Destruction makes you question everything about who you are. It makes you feel like you've lost not just a person, but your entire identity. It makes you feel like you don't know how to exist without them. When Emma left, James felt grief. He was sad, disappointed, regretful, but he still knew who he was. He still had his interests, his goals, his sense of self. When David left, Maya felt destroyed. She didn't just miss him. She missed the version of herself that existed in relationship to him. Without him, she felt like she disappeared. Do they see my shadow and love it? Or do they see my light and need it? Jung believed that we all have a shadow, the parts of ourselves we've rejected or hidden because they don't fit our idealized self-image. These might be emotions like anger or sadness, traits like selfishness or laziness, or desires that don't match our public persona. Real love can hold space for your shadow. It doesn't need you to be perfect. It can handle your bad moods, your insecurities, your petty moments. It loves you not despite your imperfections, but including them. But projection-based love usually focuses on your light, the parts of you that meet their unconscious needs. David was attracted to Maya's stability and success because those were qualities he lacked. But he couldn't handle her neediness, her insecurity, her very human desire for consistency. Sarah saw James's shadow, his tendency toward pessimism, his sometimes overwhelming need for alone time, his perfectionist streak that could make him critical. And she loved him anyway, not because these traits were wonderful, but because they were part of the whole person she'd chosen to love. If the loss of them feels like the loss of your identity, then they weren't your missing piece. They were your mirror, and mirrors are meant to show you what you still need to love in yourself. Take a moment here. This might be hard to sit with. Journal about this. What did your last intense relationship show you about yourself? What patterns? What needs? What unhealed parts? Maya realized that every man she'd fallen for had been emotionally unavailable in some way. Her unconscious was trying to solve her father complex by finding men who would finally choose her over their work, their addictions, their fear of commitment. But here's what she discovered. The solution wasn't finding a man who would choose her. The solution was choosing herself. Jung called this withdrawing projections. Instead of seeking in others what you need to develop in yourself, you take responsibility for your own wholeness. For Maya, this meant developing her own creative projects instead of living vicariously through David's art. It meant learning to validate herself instead of seeking constant reassurance. It meant becoming the stable, committed partner to herself that she'd been seeking in others. And here's the beautiful thing. As Maya became whole, her entire dating life changed. She stopped being attracted to emotionally unavailable men. They literally didn't appeal to her anymore. Instead, she started noticing kind, consistent, emotionally mature men who she would have previously dismissed as boring. This is what Jung called the transcendent function, the psychological mechanism that bridges conscious and unconscious, helping us integrate split-off parts of ourselves. When you withdraw your projections and reclaim your power, you literally become more attractive to healthier people. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's a reaction, both are transformed." Notice that word, both. But if only one of you changes, that's not fate. That's a wound reenacting itself. Let me tell you what happened to James and Sarah. 3 years later, they're still together. But their relationship doesn't look like the movies. It's not intense in the way we've been taught to value. It's deep instead of dramatic, stable instead of stimulating. They've both grown, but in parallel rather than codependently. James started his own consulting business, something he'd dreamed about for years, but never had the confidence to pursue. Sarah went back to school to get her master's degree in art therapy. They support each other's growth without needing to control it. Their conversations are different from the passionate, hours-long talks Maya and David used to have. James and Sarah talk about practical things, groceries, weekend plans, family obligations. But they also talk about deep things, their fears about the future, their childhood memories, their evolving understanding of themselves. The difference is that their deep conversations don't feel urgent. They don't feel like they're trying to merge souls or solve each other's existential problems. They feel like two whole people sharing their inner worlds. When they fight, they don't threaten to leave. They don't use love as a weapon. They don't withdraw affection as punishment. They work through things like two adults who respect each other's autonomy and are committed to finding solutions that work for both of them. And when they're apart, they miss each other, but they don't fall apart. James still takes solo trips sometimes. Sarah still has girls' nights that last until 2 a.m. They both have friendships that exist outside their relationship. They both have interests that the other person doesn't share. This might sound unromantic to some people. Where's the passion? Where's the intensity? Where's the feeling that you can't live without each other? But this is what real fate looks like. Not the Hollywood version. Not the version that makes your heart race and your hands shake. The version that makes your nervous system settle. The version that makes you feel like you can finally stop running. You'll know it's real when the love doesn't save you, it supports you. When it doesn't complete you, it honors your wholeness. Real fate doesn't find you when you're broken and need fixing. It finds you when you're whole and ready for partnership. But here's the thing about becoming whole. It's not a destination. It's a practice. Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, is the work of a lifetime. You don't graduate from it. You don't reach a point where you're done and ready for perfect love. Instead, you reach a point where you're conscious enough to choose love from wholeness rather than neediness. Mature enough to see your partner clearly rather than through the fog of projection. Brave enough to love someone for who they are rather than who you need them to be. Maya eventually did find love. 2 years after her relationship with David ended, after months of therapy and inner work, after learning to enjoy her own company and pursue her own interests, she met someone at a pottery class. Yes, the same pottery class where James met Sarah. It's funny how life works sometimes. His name was Alex. He was a social worker, steady and kind, with a quiet sense of humor and a deep commitment to his work. He wasn't dramatic or mysterious or emotionally complicated. He was just present, available, real. The first time Maya saw Alex, she almost dismissed him. He didn't trigger that familiar rush of adrenaline she'd learned to associate with attraction. He didn't make her heart race or her palms sweat. He just seemed nice. But Maya had learned to be suspicious of that old rush. She'd learned that what felt like destiny was often just her nervous system recognizing a familiar pattern of instability. So she gave Alex a chance. And slowly, over weeks and months, Maya discovered something revolutionary. Peace could be attractive. Stability could be sexy. Consistency could be deeply romantic. Alex didn't trigger her father complex because he wasn't carrying those patterns. When he said he'd call, he called. When he made plans, he kept them. When Maya shared something vulnerable, he listened without trying to fix or change her. The first time Alex told her he loved her, Maya didn't cry from relief. She smiled from recognition, because this love didn't feel like something she'd been desperately seeking. It felt like something she'd been quietly preparing for. That's how you know. The love that's meant for you won't feel like desperation finally being fed. It will feel like coming home to yourself in the presence of another person who's also made that journey home. So stop asking if they're the one. Start asking, am I becoming myself in their presence? What would it look like to love someone without needing them to fix you? What parts of yourself are you still trying to find in other people? What would change if you believed you were already whole? How would you love differently if you weren't afraid of being alone? Because here's what Jung knew that most of us are still learning. Fate never finds you when you're whole by accident. It waits for you to come home to yourself, and then it knocks. And when real fate arrives, you'll recognize it not by the chaos it creates, but by the peace it brings. Not by how it completes you, but by how it celebrates the completeness you've already found. Jung called this the marriage of opposites. Not two incomplete people trying to make one whole person, but two whole people choosing to create something beautiful together. This doesn't mean you have to be perfect before you can love or be loved. It means you have to be conscious. You have to know your patterns, your projections, your shadow parts. You have to take responsibility for your own healing rather than expecting someone else to heal you. You have to love yourself first, not in a selfish way, but in a mature way. You have to become the kind of person you'd want to be in relationship with. And then, when you meet someone who's done the same work, something magical happens. Not the desperate magic of two wounds seeking healing, but the quiet magic of two whole people choosing to share their lives. If this video helped you see something new about your own patterns, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. What did you recognize? What are you going to do differently? And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share it with them. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is help each other see our blind spots. Because here's the truth Jung spent his life teaching. The goal isn't to find perfect love. The goal is to become conscious enough to choose love that supports our growth rather than love that keeps us stuck. The goal is to love from wholeness rather than from wounds. The goal is to recognize that the person who's meant for you isn't the one who completes you, It's the one who celebrates your completeness and invites you to celebrate theirs. That's when fate becomes not something that happens to you, but something you consciously choose. And that choice changes everything. Because when you choose love from consciousness rather than compulsion, from wholeness rather than neediness, from freedom rather than fear, you're not just changing your relationships. You're changing your life. You're becoming who you were always meant to be. And that, Jung would say, is the real point of it all.